First off, in looking at arguments for God's existence, I found many people, they potentially hear argument for God's existence and they find it lacking in some way. Like it doesn't get them all the way there to believing that God exists. So I'm curious from your perspective and the conversations you've had over the years, are arguments for God's existence intended to get to some objective, like deductive certainty that God exists? Why would you say so, or why not?
Right. So it depends on the kind of argument that you're putting forward. So if you in philosophy, there's really two kinds of arguments. There are deductive arguments and inductive arguments. So a deductive argument is one where you argue from universal truths to particular truths. So, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Mm-hmm. You get 100% with deductive arguments. You get 100% certainty. That's what's great about them. The only downside with the deductive argument is that you only get that certainty if you're just as certain about the truths of the premises. Mm-hmm. So, now with the Socrates example, excuse me. With the Socrates example, we're really sure about those two premises, so the conclusion follows with, logical certainty. But many other arguments for the existence of God many of them, in fact, the majority of the ones that I use in my book, are deductive in nature. Many atheists have problems. They say, well, it doesn't get me all the way there because I'm not 100% sold on this premise or that premise, or I'm not sure that the argument actually follows in the way you're putting forward. So that's one kind of argument for God. Another kind of argument for God that's not as common in my books or work, but is very common among philosophers of religion, are called inductive arguments for the existence of God. So an inductive argument starts from a particular and it reasons to a universal. All the cats we have seen are black. All the cats we've observed, or let's say all the swans we have observed are white. Therefore, all swans are white. Most reasoning we do with scientific reasoning is inductive. Of course, that leads to the problem of induction because you can't get 100% certainty with induction.
Yeah.
I've been to Australia, for example, and I've seen black swans face to face. So Europeans might have been really sure that all swans are white. They didn't know about the black swans in Australia. It's, the black swan problem. And so there are arguments that put forward that don't say, well, this argument proves God exists, but this evidence, this feature of the natural world is more likely or more expected if God did exist. These are inductive arguments. To compare them, deductive arguments are like the kind that maybe Thomas Aquinas would use, sure, or even like William Lane Craig uses more deductive arguments like the Kalam argument. Mm-hmm. Inductive arguments are more like what the philosopher Richard Swinburne uses. He takes more of an inductive approach, saying that when you look at the world around us, all of the evidence makes God's existence more likely than less likely. Two different kinds of arguments. I prefer the deductive ones because they tend to be simpler to articulate and for people to wrap their heads around. But you're right, some people, it's also hard when you share these arguments especially if they're shared as proofs for the existence of God. Some people might say, oh, well, I don't think God exists after listening to this. I'm not moved in that way. Now, the Catholic Church teaches we can know God exists through reason, but people don't always reason correctly. I think another problem that happens here is what I might call Napoleon Dynamite syndrome. Did you ever see Napoleon Dynamite?
Oh, yeah.
Now, when that movie first came out, people told me, Trent, this is the funniest movie you'll ever see in your life. This is the funniest movie you will ever see in your life. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm ready. And then I go and see it, and I'm like, it was funny, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not the funniest movie. So if you hype it up too much, like, this proves without beyond a doubt God exists, and then someone sees it, it's like, oh, maybe. So I like to think of the proofs and arguments as signposts or things that make God more credible. Thomas Aquinas even referred to his 5 ways. He called them ways.
Yes.
These are ways to God. And I don't think they will intellectually overpower people, but when people give them a fair shake, they have a serious prospect of leading someone through reason to the existence of God.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for checking out this clip from the Practical Theism podcast. If you enjoyed this clip and you want to check out the full episode, you can do so by finding it on our YouTube channel. Definitely consider subscribing and ringing that little bell so you can continue to get updates and notifications when we release new episodes and new clips just like this one. I hope to see you soon.